What is honor? Defining honor can be difficult, and in Ghost of Tsushima, the main character, Jin Sakai, will show that true honor comes from a place beyond the reach of codes or tradition, and it requires great sacrifice and a willingness to lose everything, which only a higher form of honor can demand of a person, asking them to look beyond what they've been taught or whatever tradition they've been raised by. This type of honor is from above. So it should not surprise us that the opening shot of Ghost of Tsushima is looking up, with flags lining the edge of the frame in a very orderly fashion. And as the camera pans down, the samurai ride past with a sense of gravity. Their armor is intricate, fierce, and yet almost regal. It emanates importance. And like all good stories, it starts with a crisis that will need to be solved. A simple and very straightforward line: the Mongol Empire is invading our home. And the symbolism continues with the insurmountable odds facing them. 80 samurai sit atop a hillside with light beaming behind them, and the stakes? Imminent death in order to simply slow the invasion. And Jin Sakai, our main character, says something that will serve as the entire arc of his character. Today I die for my people. This will serve to answer our question, what is honor, and what does Jin do with his life to go beyond the honor of the samurai? Jin, in a very real sense, dies and becomes something else entirely, making it clear that honor is, at its core, an adherence to something higher, a thing beyond our reach that we know is there, something even above the code of the samurai. And the contrast can be seen almost immediately.
Tradition, courage, honor, they are what make us. We are the warriors of Tsushima. We are samurai!
Now, on rewatching this, I could not help but think that this was intentional. Jin ascends to something greater than just a warrior of Tsushima. He becomes a myth, a ghost story. He becomes a legend. And the path to getting there is one of great sacrifice, whereas he prophetically says in the opening of the game, he will die for his people. And if you aren't sure how grave the situation is, well, the game wastes no time in making it clear that the Mongols will fight with no code, no tradition, and no honor. A samurai with some very honorable lineage is killed in a heartless, cold, and dishonorable way. He's not just burned, he is beheaded. This type of beheading would be seen as dishonorable to the samurai because it didn't happen in battle. It's basically an execution, and it is the height of disrespect. This extends the crisis of the invasion of the Mongols beyond just the threat of death. It is that they will fight in a way that dishonors anybody they cross. And in an almost prophetic way, Jin's uncle says,
Cowards without honor deserve no mercy. No mercy!
Now, in my estimation, Jin follows this charge throughout the entirety of the game, and ultimately, in the end, so does Jin's uncle. And like any good opening sequences in games or movies, they can't help but have the hero set up to not win. The crisis of the story must extend to the heart of the main character's journey. The thing that really cements what will be required of Jin is not just the invasion, it's the explanation from the main antagonist to Jin's uncle.
But while you were sharpening your sword, do you know how I prepared for today? I learned. I know your language, your traditions, your beliefs, which villages to tame and which to burn. So I'll ask you once again, samurai, do you surrender?
Khotan Khan did not prepare for battle by simply sharpening his sword. He studied the traditions of the people. And what I love about this is that the writers and the game developers respect you enough to piece together what he means. He is saying, without explicitly saying it, that he will use the tradition and the honor of the samurai against them. He knows how they think. He knows what they are not willing to do. This is a very, very subtle piece of groundwork laid for what Jin will have to do in order to fight for his people. And if it isn't clear yet, it should be clear when Jin wakes up and faces his first major dilemma. He does not have his sword, and he has to hide. This is more untethering than just being injured or hurt. It's dishonorable to have to hide and not to fight. And Yuna will kill a Mongol and utter another somewhat prophetic line.
You want your sword? Follow me.
The unspoken word here is you will need to follow a different path in order to proceed, one where she tricked and killed a man when his back was to her. It is at this point that Jin learns the Mongols have overtaken half of the island. This is also when you learned that Lord Shimura is Jin's uncle, and his drive to save him is so strong he's almost foolhardy about it. But as Jin says, he is the only family he has left. Keep this in mind as we consider what Jin does with his honor throughout the story. When we get our first flashback of Jin with his uncle, it's clear that Jin is driven by emotion, most notably anger. And this is where his uncle gives him a gift that will add even more weight to their relationship as the story develops. He is going to train him not just to master his blade, but first control his emotions. Now, this might seem cliche or predictable, but this flashback is important in seeing how Jin ascends to a legend and he releases the tradition of the samurai. He does so because he is able to set aside emotion in order to do what is necessary. And the training section with his uncle ends with Jin having to recite the virtues that guide them.
For generations, our families have lived by a code. Tell me the virtues that guide us.
Loyalty to our Lord, control over our emotions, and
You know this.
honor, to fight bravely and uphold the legacy of Clan Sakai.
Those are your father's words. What does honor mean to you?
I guess protecting people. The ones who can't fight for themselves.
You have a good heart. But first, we must show everyone that we serve our Lord with courage, integrity, and self-control.
You say that like it's easy.
It's never easy, Jin. I struggle with it every day. But we must set an example for our people by remaining true to our code and to ourselves. That is the meaning of honor.
And this is very minute, but it sets the stage for the entire game. Jin sees honor as protecting others, especially those who cannot defend themselves. His uncle sees honor as staying true to a code. It is also important to notice from this exchange that Jin will not just be faced with the choice of abandoning their code, but also the very words of his father and the family name. In other words, he will be faced with sacrificing everything that defines him, not just the way of the samurai, but the very name that he has from his father, his lineage, his very identity. And they put this on display very early when Yuna recommends that they get in close and kill the enemy without a sound. And Jin questions this because it would be, quote, without honor. Now at first, he holds firm and he says he will not break his code. Now this leads to some back and forth with Jin and Yuna about repeating mistakes that got the samurai in this situation in the first place. But Jin is resolute and he thinks his plan will work because he will strike first. He fights in his own way, all the way to the Mongol leader, where we finally see that Jin's uncle is alive. Now, after this boss fight that you cannot win, Jin refuses to surrender, and he is thrown from the bridge. So, we now have the second time that the main character has failed to achieve victory while holding true to his code. But this is not the first time that failure has happened for Jin. We are immediately greeted with a flashback where Jin's father is dying and asking for help. But Jin is paralyzed by fear and stays hidden, and his father dies. And just to make sure the sacrifice of Jin is driven even deeper into his character arc, we see just how important his father's legacy is to him.
He died because of me.
Your father fell in battle saving his only son. His reward is a warrior's death. Now you will carry on his legacy. Your father's spirit resides within this blade. He is always with you.
So the weight of Jin's failure is twofold. He failed to help his father, and now he has failed to rescue his uncle. And this will put him on a path of abandoning the very thing that he clung to in the shadow of his father's death. This is also when a deeper relationship with his uncle begins. And now is when the team at Sucker Punch intersect a wonderful game mechanic with a very meaningful moment for the main character. Jin asks his father how he can save his uncle, and the wind stirs and guides him. This symbolically represents the beginning of Jin's new journey, which makes the use of the wind mechanic quite brilliant. It gives the player something functional while also adding a slightly mystical nature to the story ahead. The wind leads Jin to Yuna, where they discuss how he failed, and I love that they don't have some forced moment here where Jin accidentally kills in a dishonorable way and then he has to sort of justify his new approach. He reasons his way to it, rather logically.
The Khan expects to fight a war against the samurai. He will anticipate our every move, unless we find new ways to surprise him. That's how we'll save Lord Shimura and retake our home.
Jin, staying true to his own definition of honor, starts his true journey at this moment. Now after this, they set the stage for growing your list of allies and a tool set, which I think is a perfect canvas for the game to truly begin. They waste no time putting Jin in an impossible situation. In order to save prisoners on your first mission with Yuna, she makes it clear that if an alarm is raised, the prisoners will be killed. So Jin is faced with a choice: sneak in and kill silently, like thieves, as he says, or stay true to his code, which would lead to the prisoners being killed. And you can see the tension in his view of the world. The island was cleansed of criminals, and order was brought by open justice and a code of honor. So he sees the potential actions before him as the antithesis of what brings order. But they've already established that Jin thinks honor is protecting those who cannot protect themselves. So he could hold true to his code of the samurai and create a situation where the prisoners are killed, or hold to his own view of honor and prioritize the prisoners and sneak. So you do it. Now, unlike other games, your first stealth assassination has weight. It's clumsy, it's messy, and it's coupled with a cutscene. The game wants the player to feel the experience of not just doing something violent, but something against what defines Jin as a person. This is followed by another flashback with Jin's uncle. In this scene, Jin is told to execute a man for his crime of trying to kill his uncle, but he is told to look him in the eye. And the purpose of this is to teach him that a samurai never acts out of anger or fear. It culminates in his uncle saying this is what makes them samurai, and only cowards strike from the shadows. So Jin is not just forsaking a code or a rule set, he is aligning with cowardice when he chooses to kill like an assassin from the shadows. After this mission, Yuna acknowledges how hard it must have been to go against his code, and Jin sees it as doing what had to be done. This mission is essentially the beginning of Jin as the Ghost of Tsushima. He goes from struggling to kill from the shadows to moving with ease. The developers expertly use different animations to make it seem as though he is getting more comfortable and efficient as he progresses through the camp, as well as when you progress through the game. It's no accident that the first mission is titled The Warrior's Code, softly hinting that Jin now has a new code and it supersedes the one taught to him by his uncle. From this point, you begin your journey to rescuing your uncle by growing your list of allies. Starting with Ishikawa, the pattern has already been set by Yuna. They will ask you for help before they agree to help you. It's worth mentioning at this point that very significant moments will happen between Jin and his uncle, and the lead up is Jin doing everything he can to not just liberate the island and help those on it, but all that he is doing is centering around his personal objective to rescue his uncle. But just in case you weren't sure that Jin was carrying guilt with him as he was forced to kill from the shadows, they remind you a good ways into the game with a very familiar flashback.
Jin. We looked him in the eye with courage. A coward strike from the shadows.
Forgive me, Uncle.
You can see that Jin is not just feeling the weight of what he's doing as a samurai, but with respect to his relationship with his uncle. He doesn't speak of shame or guilt, but he speaks of wanting forgiveness from his uncle. This makes sense given the entire reason that Jin is willing to forsake the way of the samurai is because rescuing his uncle is his driving motivation. This creates a beautiful tension where the primary motivator for abandoning his code is his uncle, which is also the strongest motivator to want to keep the very code that he is breaking. This is a great time to see how Jin's uncle is doing in captivity.
Your nephew stalks my men, tears them apart like a beast.
I'm certain you've done worse.
Oh, you pretend we are different. But we fight for the same thing. To create a legacy that outlives us.
I won my legacy with duty and honor. Brought order to my home. And justice for my people. You are nothing like me.
Neither is your nephew. But his name is bound to your legacy.
Legacy is more than a name.
Khotan Khan taunts Lord Shimura with the news that his nephew is attacking his men like a beast. And here is where we see Jin's uncle's worldview about what differentiates the samurai from the Mongols. It's a classic scene of villain versus the stoic captive, where the villain attempts to build a bridge, insisting that they are not that different from each other. But for Lord Shimura, leaving a legacy through honor, order, and justice is the key difference. And this is the first sign of separation between Jin and his uncle. Khotan Khan says that his nephew is now nothing like him, therefore corrupting his legacy through their name that they share. Jin's uncle makes no attempt to correct this, and he merely says that legacy is more than a name, which, little side note here, I think this is beautiful and prophetic because legacy is more than a name, and what happens with Jin's name is pretty significant. But this is the first scene where it's clear Jin's uncle is facing something worse than captivity or starvation. He must face what Jin is becoming. And the Khan makes it clear he wants to take honor from Lord Shimura by leaving him to die in shame. So while this scene may seem cliche, it is actually deeply villainous. He is not just taking Lord Shimura's life from him, but everything that defined him: his castle, his home, his honor, and even his nephew. As the story progresses, Jin continues to help his friends and allies to grow the list of those willing to help him, but this also brings with it more opportunities for Khotan to torture Lord Shimura with news of his nephew's choices. And given that Shimura does not believe the stories, it is clear how strongly he will feel when he learns the truth. It is at this point in the story that Jin is openly being referred to as the Ghost. The birth of a new identity for him does not just visit his uncle in the way of rumors and taunts from Khotan Khan. It comes with another cost, and that is betrayal. Ryuzo, friend of Jin's who has been helping him up to this point, decides that the bounty put on the ghost from the Khan is more valuable than friendship. This leads to the first official duel in the game, and it's one of the most poignant moments in Jin's journey to becoming the ghost, because he will not just lose his status as samurai or standing with his uncle, he will also lose friendships. This is why the sacrifice of Jin Sakai cannot be overstated. I do love the scene after the duel with Ryuzo though. Jin still believes they can work together to save the island, and in one last gesture of some sliver of remaining friendship, Ryuzo rather pitifully says the island belongs to the Mongols now, but he does not call Jin the ghost. He says the samurai is here. Whether this was intentional by the writers or not, I like that Ryuzo almost acknowledges Jin's superior status to his own as he runs away in cowardice, resolved to work for the Mongols, but still viewing Jin as a samurai. This leads to the moment where you finally rescue your uncle, and the tension is subtle, but it is there. Shimura vows to win the war as samurai. And while Jin faces his own new horizon with his uncle, Ryuzo's corruption goes beyond betrayal of a friend. He is forced by Koten to burn one of his countrymen to earn the promised food for his men. And then in desperation, he pleads for the castle gates to be open. While very horrific and tragic, it is a just corruption of a man willing to betray his friend for money. And then we finally get the moment that we've been waiting for. Jin and his uncle discuss what he has been doing up to this point. Lord Shimura does not mince his words, and neither does Jin. They both stand firm in their conviction, and Shimura even acknowledges the debt that he owes Jin for his rescue. But he also extends the opportunity for Jin to change paths and save their home together as samurai. This is a grace extended to Jin that may not have been offered to just anyone. Perhaps this is meant to be seen as leniency from his uncle due to his rescue, but maybe it's also because he just clearly loves Jin as a son. The moment, however, is left unresolved, as Jin sort of dodges the question and immediately asks about Yuna and her need for safe passage. You even spend a mission fighting alongside your uncle, only to have him re-emphasize that they will win this war as samurai. This is also when you are charged to get your father's armor, but you aren't really given the option to play the game as a samurai, so you just sort of continue playing as the ghost, growing in your ability to both fight and kill stealthily. Likely this is to communicate that Jin has changed and doesn't really see a way back, given the task ahead is one where he, as he said to his uncle, must do what he must. But as the story progresses, the enormity of what Jin is sacrificing grows. As their fight against the Mongols continues, his uncle informs him of his plans to formally adopt him, make him the heir of his legacy, and see Jin as the future leader of their people. It's a touching scene given all that Jin has done to rescue his uncle, and yet it's laced with sadness because Jin has not yet abandoned any of his new ways. This gives a sense of looming trouble on the horizon, beyond just their escalating fight with the Mongols. You can almost sense there's a storm brewing in the background of the scene where Shimura says they will achieve victory as father and son, and the Shogun himself will celebrate their victory. When Jin finally dons his father's armor, he's still haunted by how his father died, the words echoing, "May your death benefit all beings." And in what feels like an act of symbolism, Jin puts on the mask first. And after opening his eyes, it seems clear that his transformation is now complete, releasing the past and becoming more than simply another samurai. But the story takes a turn when Jin is captured and must face Koten Khan while tied to a pole. And this is probably the best scene to establish just how much Jin has changed, to the point that even the Khan can see it. Correcting Jin as he insists he is samurai, Koten says no, he has become more, and Taka, the other prisoner, declares that Jin is already a legend. The difference is, the Khan wants to leverage this for power, and Jin does not. He stands immovable and unfazed by the Khan's words. But I love this scene because it brilliantly shows how the Khan is already a lesser man than Jin. Taka, in an act of defiance, refuses to kill Jin, and it costs him his life, showing that as a legend, Jin already has more power while tied up than the Khan does with all his brutality and strength, furthering the message that all that Jin is sacrificing is merely elevating him above his ruthless enemy. This is what divides them. One does what is necessary for power, prestige, and fame. Jin does what is necessary to save others. And while it is costing him everything, it is elevating him to an almost mythical status. And the tension in the story does not leave, and his standing as the ghost is still tentative. Once he returns to his uncle, he learns that the shogun has approved the request for Jin to be adopted, but more than that, his uncle states he will be the heir to Clan Shimura, and not as a ghost, but as a samurai. It is likely not an accident that the writers chose to have his uncle say a ghost instead of the ghost, as he does not view it as a status of legend, but as something dishonorable. This makes it clear, after Taka's death, that Jin is truly straddling two worlds, two identities, and he will eventually have to choose. And it happens sooner than you might expect given the pacing up to this point. Jin defies his uncle's orders and uses poison in order to save those who are captive.
You defied me.
I did what I had to. For them.
Is this how you want to be remembered?
He defended us.
By spreading fear and chaos.
We are at war.
And you are acting like the enemy. This is not our way.
Your way can't save our people.
The Shogun will demand a head. But it does not have to be yours. I know she drove you to this.
Uncle.
Renounce the ghost. You must blame her for this outrage. Tell them you are Jin Shimura, loyal servant to the Shogun. My heir. My son.
I am not your son. I am the ghost.
And the confrontation leads to Jin not just choosing the ghost over being a samurai, but the ghost over being his uncle's adopted son. Notice that Jin no longer speaks just in what must be done, but he uses language around identity. He doesn't just say, "I'm not your son." He asserts, "I am the ghost." His transformation is complete, and the final piece of his formal self has been sacrificed, his last familial connection severed. This also takes place after Jin must kill Ryuzo, his friend, so this moment is truly the last moment that Jin Sakai exists, and the ghost is born. But the story doesn't end here. Legends take time to be born. Even once in prison, Jin is still committed to his people, and at first he refuses to break out. But when he realizes he's going to be shipped off to the shogun and judge, he's left with no choice. This ushers in the third and final act of the story, where you must kill the Khan. And facing the Khan and winning isn't really important. The Mongols are a subtext to the real story, a story of sacrifice and of a true and higher honor. And the victory for Jin and his allies is short-lived, because the reality of what faces him and his uncle comes immediately after. This contrast is both beautiful and tragic. Like drifting boats set on unchangeable courses, neither man can relent. They both strongly hold to their conviction. Jin's uncle views him as having no honor, and Jin views his uncle as a slave to honor, willing to let people die in order to stay true to a code. But his uncle's love permeates the scene, declaring that Jin was always his son, even though the adoption never truly happened, which sadly is so close to how Jin sees the world. Some higher, above codes, above legal claims. He was Lord Shimura's son, just like Jin's honor is higher than the one that his uncle clings to. The contrast of this scene is shown in more than just the two men and their views. The clash of the white and the red petals on the ground as they part ways for Jin to write the final words of Clan Sakai is a visual representation of their different paths. It can also be seen in the way that his uncle prepares in the shadow of the tree and Jin sits with the sun on his face, almost showing that one is stuck in the shadow of the past while one is looking at a new horizon and future, but not without looking back. Jin's bond with his uncle was born in the wake of his parents' death, and he wasn't just given the chance to be raised as a son by his uncle, but trained as a warrior. And that training led to this moment, where Jin simply says, "I'm ready." The music, the framing, the sun setting in the background, the whole setup for this moment is like an epic ending to a movie, and yet it is somber in that it represents the last thing Jin must do in his journey of sacrifice. It's almost poetic that the training from his uncle is the very thing that enables Jin to defeat him. The framing, again, is beautiful and symbolic. Jin, surrounded in sunlight, standing, resolute, and waiting. And then, it's over. You are given the choice as a player to spare your uncle or to kill him, and honor him with the warrior's death. Now, I chose in my playthrough to kill him as a gift of honor to my uncle, but it felt to me like one last final piece of Jin's sacrifice in his journey to a higher form of honor, one where he would even put his uncle above himself and honor him with the warrior's death. But if you choose to spare him, Jin's uncle says he will be hunted for the rest of his days. This is after Jin says he has no honor, but he will not kill his family. So even in sparing his uncle, he's willing to set aside his own honor in a context of putting his uncle above himself. In one final act of symbolism, Jin covers his face with the mask and walks away, marking the end of Jin Sakai. Like a fading mist, he becomes the ghost. Remember at the start of this, Jin said that today he would die for his people, and ultimately, in the end, he did. Which still leaves us with the question, what is honor? Was Jin's uncle correct? Is honor found in order, justice, and setting an example for your people, even if it means letting people die or dying yourself while clinging to a code? The very idea stems from the belief that something higher should dictate your actions. In that, both Jin and his uncle are similar. They feel called to stay true to something higher than themselves. For Lord Shimura, it was the code of the samurai. For Jin, it is, in a way, even higher than that. Jin Sakai, from the very beginning, defined honor in a way that was higher than that of the samurai. His definition was protecting people, the ones who can't fight for themselves. And this was the driving force for all that he did. Willing to lose his honor, his status, his identity, his lineage, his friend, his last living family and his uncle. He was even willing to lose his name. Not just his father's name Sakai, but his actual name. And in his willingness to sacrifice all for others, he became a hero. He became a legend. He became the Ghost of Tsushima.